morning. We're going to talk about simplifying rational expressions today. And so we need to go over a couple old things. Exponent rules are old but useful, especially here. So let's just talk about what happens. When you are multiplying things that have exponents, do you guys remember what to do? You add them. When you are dividing, you subtract. So multiply, add, divide means subtract. If you have a power to a power, you multiply those suckers. If you have a negative exponent, it means it's in the wrong place. So if you have a negative in the numerator, it really goes in the denominator with a positive exponent. If you had a negative in the denominator, you would flip it up to the numerator and make it positive. It just indicates that it's in the wrong location. And anything to the zero power equals 1. If you want to know why, you can refer back to old videos about the exponent rules, or you can just ask me in class. This thing that says special trick, this is something that you will find comes in handy when you're simplifying, adding, subtracting, multiplying, and dividing rational expressions. So I would make sure that you have this written down somewhere um, super obvious. It's used a lot in calculus also. And the steps to simplify are to factor them if they can, simplify anything that can be simplified, and then eliminate anything that is the same. So remember, if you have the same thing in the numerator and the denominator, for example, you have 4 divided by 4, that equals 1, right? So we can just cross those out. If you had x squared over x squared, that equals 1. If you have a plus 5 over a plus 5, that also equals 1. So those you're able to cross out. All right, so let's do it. The first one is an Algebra 1 style problem where there's nothing to factor first. So the first thing we're going to do is simplify. We don't need to do step 1. So we want to simplify the fraction. What is a common divisor for 20 and 14? The first thing that jumps in my head is 2, so that would be 10 and 7. So that's got to be right. So down here, I'm going to write 10 over 7. We have x to the 6th over x squared. And when you are dividing, you subtract, so x to the 4th. So this is the final answer, 10x to the 4th over 7. Of course, you could write it like this, and that would also be correct. Number 2. Step 1, factor. Can we factor the numerator? Yes. And then you need to go through the factoring questions. Is there a GCF? Yes, there's a GCF of 6. What's left? K minus 6. In the denominator, we have k minus 6. There's no GCF there, so we just have k minus 6. There's nothing to simplify, and now we eliminate. Since we have k minus 6 over k minus 6, we cross them off, and the answer to this problem is 6. Let's look at number 3. And I usually write them out horizontally. I don't know why I wrote it this way this time. But if you're writing it on your paper, just write it as clearly as you can. All right, so factor. Let's look at the top. Can we factor it? Is there a GCF? No. Is it a binomial? Yes. Is it a difference of 2 squares? P squared is a perfect square. 49 is a perfect square. And it's subtraction, so it is. So you take the square root of p squared, which is p, and the square root of 49, which is 7. And you write x plus 7, x minus 7. And by x I mean p, because the problem has a p, not an x, sorry. All right, this is why I asked you guys to get really good at factoring before we began. All right, next, on the bottom we have 7 minus p. Now, it looks promising, right? Like this is the time when you'd be like, oh, almost, but you can't cross these off because in this one p is positive and in this one p is negative. 7 is negative, 7 is positive. So there's a trick, the one we talked about at the top, where our numerator stays the same, it's fine. But we actually factor out a negative 1 from the denominator. If we do that, we can rearrange them. Because negative 1 times p is still negative p. And negative 1 times negative 7 is still positive 7. in which case these expressions are equivalent and we can do that. We have a match, so we can eliminate it. So the answer is negative p plus 7. And I know that seems weird that I just kind of put that negative 1 on top. You can do that because if you divide by a negative, it becomes negative. Um, it's not wrong to write it this way. It's just weird to keep it written like that. So this is really the correct answer. All right, hopefully that was a good little overview into simplifying, and we'll do multiplying next.